Jay Stager from Coal Country Vines and Wines. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to know if you're a beginning wine drinker, you just never really studied up on it much, and you're going to be around people who drink wine and you just like to be able to hold your own in a conversation. And we're going to start talking about that right now. Now, I've got a sheet of paper that I have down in the description. There's a link to it. You could copy it, take it with you. It's got basically all the basic terms, and I'm going to cover these in short. Just give you a quick summary of the whole thing. First off, you've got red wines, white wines, and rosés. Those are the three major categories. And then, of course, after that, you have port-style wines, you have dessert wines, which we'll go into a little bit about dessert wines in a second. But suffice it to say, white wines are most of the time from white grapes. You can get a white wine from a red grape as long as you don't ferment the skins and seeds along with the wine. On the other hand, red wines, normally you have to ferment the skins and the seeds together to get both the color out of the skins so that you have the red wine, and you get the tannins along with that, which tannins are, they're kind of the bite or the bitterness to a red wine. A lot of people who get headaches from wine blame the tannins for being the cause of the headache, and that's not true. There's about 5 different things you can get headaches from wine, one of them being the alcohol, which I've had that headache myself from time to time. All right, so then we have port-style wines. The cool thing about port-style wines is they're originally from Portugal. We actually make a couple of port-style wines here, but what you do is you ferment the grape about halfway, and then you put grape brandy in it, which is called fortification. And what does what that does is it kills the yeast, and it allows the natural grape sugars to be the sweetener of the wine. So you get a higher alcohol wine, and you get a wine that is natural. It's pretty amazing wine. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about flavors. White wines, generally fruit forward. They're normally not barrel aged in oak, except for maybe a Chardonnay, like this one. This is a Chardonnay from Napa Valley, Robert Mondavi. Normally, I'm not crazy about Napa Valley Chardonnays, but this is the reserve Chardonnay from Robert Mondavi, which is spectacular. Then you have your regular whites, which are basically meant to be drank right away. They're fruit forward. They go anywhere from completely dry to super sweet. There's a whole range, but there's very, very little tannin in them. Then you have red wines, like this one over here, which is a Stag's Leap Cabernet Sauvignon. Stag's Leap, in case you don't know, is one of the most famous wineries in the country because their Cabernet Sauvignon beat the French in 1973. It was a wine competition. It was a blind wine tasting competition, and Stag's Leap from Napa Valley, California, won over the fancy French wines. And of course, you've got the sparkling wines, which is a whole nother category. There are sparkling wines. There's champagne, which nowadays you cannot call a wine champagne that isn't made in Champagne. Champagne is a region of France. This is a sparkling wine, which is basically the same thing as a champagne. It's just not from Champagne, France. So sparkling wine is naturally carbonated, and then there's carbonated wines, which carbonated wine is a wine that's just a regular wine. You overpressurize it with carbon dioxide, and it causes it to be fizzy, which some people like. So you have 3 different methods of carbonation. You have 2 different methods of carbonation, but 3 different types of sparkling wine. Okay, and now we're going to talk just a little bit about oak barrel aging. Now, we talked before about the tannins that are in the Cabernet Sauvignon from the skins, and the oak barrel aging actually adds a little bit more tannin, but it's a different kind of tannin. It's basically an oaky flavor, which is a very simplistic way of saying it, because there's got to be there must be 500 different types of oak. Rosés. Rosés are either a blend of a red and a white wine, or what they'll do sometimes is they'll leave the skin contact just a little bit with the juice, which skin contact means you're going to ferment the wine with the skins. But the Wisconsin grapes, you don't even have to do that. You just press them directly, the red grapes directly, and you'll have a rosé. Dessert wine. Dessert wines are, by common definition, a wine that's drank after a meal. It's usually sweet. Sometimes it has more alcohol than normal, such as a port-style wine, but it can be served with or without an actual dessert. The government definition of a dessert wine, the U.S. government definition of a dessert wine, is anything above 16% alcohol. The Wisconsin state definition of a dessert wine is anything greater than 14% alcohol. Hence the confusion. I don't know why anybody get that confused about that, but oh, maybe. I think I was confused for a long time about that. This is what you really want to pay attention to if somebody starts talking wine, because there are many, many places in the world that make wine, including Wisconsin, but we are not one of the main regions. As a matter of fact, we have a minuscule amount of production compared to even some of the other smaller wine producing states. California actually produces 85% of all the wine in the country, which that's pretty impressive, because Washington produces a lot, and California produces way, way, way more. So now I'm going to start out with France, because France is the most famous wines, even though Greece doesn't produce much wine and send it out to the world, but Greece is where a lot of the original wine talk started. So, there was actually the Greek god of wine as Bacchus, and so that's kind of a cool thing. I spent some time in Greece, and I got to see grapes growing out of rocks. Grapes grow everywhere in Greece, and it's surprising because it is a desert. It's like a dry rock, but grapes seem to love it there, and that's probably why they started so early in history. Incidentally, the first grapes were found to be cultivated 9,000 years ago, which unbelievable. So we're grape growers here, and it's got to be the oldest profession in the world. 9,000 years people have been growing grapes. All right, so now then the main regions in France would be Bordeaux, the most famous. I've had Bordeaux's, and I've had some good ones, but the most famous Bordeaux's, you can't touch them for under $1,000 a bottle, which I've never had one of those. I had a friend that was actually from the Bordeaux region of France, and I asked him once, I said, "Do you ever get to taste those great wines?" And he said, "One bottle once at my wedding." That's so even the French that live in the Bordeaux region don't get to drink those wines. The other regions of France that are notable is the Rhone region, which makes a lot of Syrahs and a lot of really good wines. Champagne, which we talked about before, and Burgundy, which is big region for Pinot Noir. And if you like Pinot Noirs, it's a real light-bodied wine that they grow a lot of it in the United States in Oregon. The Willamette Valley is the most famous for Pinot Noir. Okay, let's go on to Italy, second most famous wine region of the world. And I'll just talk about two of them, the Piedmont region and Tuscany, where most of the real famous Italian wines come from. Then there's Australia, which Australia became really noted for Syrah, or what they call Shiraz. And then it's the same grape, same exact grape. It's just the Australians decided to call it Shiraz instead of Syrah. All right, New Zealand, right next door, is very famous for Sauvignon Blanc, which if you've ever tasted a a Sauvignon Blanc from the Marlborough district of New Zealand. It's very, very hard to even drink anything else. That is the best Blanc I've ever tasted. All right, and then you got Argentina, which is well known for their Malbecs. Brush your teeth right away afterward, though, because it's like putting ink in your mouth. Very, very good wines, though. Then we have Germany, of course, which probably should have been third on the list. Germany, like all the things the Germans do, they're very, very technical, and they're very, very innovative in their winemaking. Ice wine started in Germany, which was around the turn of the century. Didn't get famous for many, many decades after that, but the Germans always experimented with colder and colder winemaking practices. They left the grapes hang on there late harvest, and they just kept going later and later and later. And they've got a wine called Trockenbeeren-Auslese, which is basically they let the grapes turn into raisins. It's not ice wine, but it's like a pressed raisin. And that is the only really famous bottle that I have in my collection is one of them Trockenbeeren-Ausleses. It's 1979. It's good for almost 100 years, and I think we're going to open it when we finally make a penny of profit on this place. And we're going to have a toast to my dad, who got my wife Kay and I into wine. So now we are down to a couple more. Portugal, which I talked about before. Portugal makes they originated the port-style wines, and that started in, I believe, the 18th century. And they started making these port-style wines because they were having problems getting their wine from Portugal to England before it spoiled. At the time, England and France weren't getting along, so Portugal started selling them wine. And so in order to make it keep longer, they put some grape brandy in it, and it kept longer, and all of a sudden the English said, hey, we kind of like this stuff. Keep on sending it. And the rest is history. It became very popular, still popular today. All right, now California, the USA. I'm going to talk about two regions of the USA, California and Washington. California has Napa, and I've got two Napa wines here, a Chardonnay and a Cabernet Sauvignon. And those are amazing wines. There's only one other place in the country that I've tasted quite the same kind of complexities as Napa Valley, and that is Red Mountain, Washington. There's a couple of smaller AVAs in Washington that are as good or even better, but they're very small and very hard to find those wines. If you're involved in a comparison, or if you're asked to give your opinion of a wine, what you're going to discuss is four things, starting with sweetness, acidity, tannin, and body. And sweetness, of course, that doesn't really need an explanation. Everybody knows what sweetness is. And there's naturally sweet wines, which there's not that many of them, but then there's wines with sugar or concentrated grape juice added, and those are more common. And acidity. Acidity in California, they fight for acidity because their acids are so low in their wines. Their whites tend to turn what's called flabby because they just don't have enough acid in them. So they're adding acid. But we don't have that problem in Wisconsin. With our cool summers here, we have plenty of acid. Most of the time, too much. Tannin. That's what we talked about before. In red wines, they have tannin, and tannin is part of the grape skin. And if you have ever chewed on a grape skin and you get that dry, astringent feeling in your mouth, that is what where the tannin comes from. So when you ferment the skins with the grapes, this comes out of the skin and goes into the wine. And that is the one reason that reds are aged, is those tannins are a real long string of like a protein. And through aging, that string breaks into smaller pieces and becomes really, really smooth and well-rounded, and it just adds to the experience. To me, it makes the wine almost feel thicker. It feels more like you're drinking something like a syrup instead of just you know, a watery liquid with alcohol in it. So then there's body, and body is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts of wine that there is. And the body of a wine really is basically another word for complexity. Viscosity can be part of it. If wine is more viscous, it will contribute to the body. A lot of people say mouthfeel. It's got a real thick mouthfeel, and they're describing body. But the body also includes all of these flavors, the complexity, the bite, you know, the spiciness, all of these different these adjectives? Anyway, all of these descriptors of wine, that all goes into describing the body. Now, when you're talking about flavors, the most common flavors: fruity, earthy, spicy, smoky, flowery. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other flavors. We have a chart hanging on our wall with all the different flavors, and I guess it's not hundreds and hundreds, but it's over 100. It's like 150 different flavors. And if you ever get a chance to go to a sensory perception class, you know, even if you're a wine novice, it's worth it, because you just get to understand how these people are coming up with these flavors and these descriptions, and it's quite cool. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button down below and you'll get a notification whenever we come out with a new video. Also, let us know in the comments what you think of this video and what you'd like to see in the next video. Until then, Cold Country Vines and Wines, Jay Stager, cheers.